To join us in welcoming Dollie Cole to the Corvette Hall of Fame, please welcome her daughter, Ann Cole Pierce.
All this and engraved glasses also. Yes. On behalf of my mother, Dollie Cole, and my brothers, Jeff, Joe, and Nick, and our families, thank you. Thank you so much for this honor, and congratulations to Briggs Cunningham and Tom Peters and their families. Pretty cool. This is just great. Mom would be so pleased and proud to be inducted and to now get to spend eternity emblazed on a flag facing Dad's, surrounded by a whole building of beautiful Corvettes with retail shopping close by. My dad, Edward Cole, told me when you get up to speak, make it short, then sit down and shut up. My mom also gave advice for this circumstance. Tell a story. If the story is good, they will forgive you, even if the talk isn't. So my remarks will be short. I know you'll be grateful, with a few Dolly stories thrown in. My mother was the real deal, an outspoken, beautiful, talented, funny, generous, opinionated, stubborn woman who in the 1960s and 70s shattered the image of the American auto industry's quiet, stay-in-the-background wife. She was dubbed the Martha Mitchell of General Motors, admitted that the strongest muscle in her body was her mouth, and my dad once told her that if she had been born a man, she would have been punched in the nose every day of her life. Part of my job and my privilege the last 5 years since she passed away has been to go through the papers of my dad's, some of which have gone to the Bentley, but many of which have gone to the National Corvette Museum. One letter I want to share with you. It's dated March 15, 1971, to Jerry Flint at the New York Times from my dad, with reference to the Times' desire to do an article on some of my mother's activities. Dad wrote, "First of all, let me say I object strongly to the statements made to my wife and repeated in your letter, indicating that if Mrs. Cole did not grant you an interview, you would write the story anyway and would accuse GM of trying to muzzle her if she refused, risking the headlines, 'GM muzzles officers' wives.' I don't think such tactics are a credit either to you or the New York Times. Secondly, let me assure you, there will be no attempt on my part to muzzle my wife. For your information, this would be quite impossible, even if I wanted to." Truer words were never spoken. Mom was very outspoken. She spoke her mind. Her way wasn't the way of corporate presidents' wives. She said, "Silence is not golden. Silence is when one doesn't care enough to speak out. That's what's wrong with the world." She was not afraid to put her views in writing either, and she could be controversial. In June of 1991, she wrote to Ted Koppel when he did a segment on the auto industry leaders she thought was unfairly slanted. She said she thought it was a blatant, unfair attack on the U.S. auto industry and was without honesty, value, or merit, and that they, referring to those leaders, are such fine gentlemen that they didn't tell you to go to hell. Lee Iacocca wrote her when he saw it, saying, "No one can ever accuse you of not telling it like it is, Dolly." Mr. Poling of Ford also stated to her in a letter, "I would have loved to have been there in the same room as Mr. Koppel as he read your letter, although I'm not sure he would have enjoyed it nearly as much as I did." This is the same woman who called into Phil Donahue, live, to refute one of Nader's Rader's criticisms. It was an interesting night at our house that night. When Dad died, President Nixon wrote my mother, stating, "You can take comfort in the fact that he was always proud of your devotion to him." And she was devoted. She loved Edward N. Cole, her 4 children and friends, and General Motors, especially Chevrolet, and depending on the week, the order of that list rotated. She resolved early in life to have a life that made a difference. She got involved in a lot of organizations, mostly protecting the helpless, children and animals. But one of the ones she got involved in was the National Corvette Museum. She became its chairman, coming on board when the museum was struggling. As Wendell told you, her favorite reminder to the board was check your ego at the door. She thought that was very important. She was fighting for what she thought needed to be done, and she thought her way was the only way. She also attended many Corvette Club shows and meetings, speaking on behalf of the museum and hosting fundraisers. And as my brother Nick noted, she loved to talk with anyone and all. If you had a Corvette, if you were an owner at the show, spend all day and evening with you. And I'll bet a few of you even have her name scrawled in that distinctive hand under your hoods. Her favorite car, by the way, she drove it in 1965, a 1965 Nassau Blue Corvette, 4-speed roadster with a blue interior, a removable hardtop, and side pipes she called Bluebird. Dad had installed a big block 396 V8 in it a year before the engines were released to the public. We were stopped on Telegraph Road in Bloomfield Hills more than once so a police officer could ride in it while I was left holding grocery bags on the side of the road. Corvette was more than a brand to her. It was Dad. As my brother Nick said, being a part of the museum and the Corvette community was one of her ways of staying connected to him. And she did the best job she could to represent him. It was important to Mom to promote Dad and Corvette so that history would not forget. He would expect nothing less from her, and she could do nothing less for him. Thank you for this great honor.